So today we're talking about extinction, asking, is near-term human extinction inevitable in your mind? We'd love for you to join this conversation. Do call us at 415-663-8492. Now, we Homo sapiens are newcomers to the web of life on Earth. Our life here progressed for thousands of millions of years before anything resembling our kind came along. But life on Earth has not nearly been the same since humans took over. The rate of extinctions today rivals the days of the dinosaurs' demise. That was about 85 million years ago. And major extinction events are nothing new for the planet, but species are now dying out at alarming rates thanks to humans. That's really the key. Past extinctions have been sort of geologic events like asteroid strikes, volcano eruptions, natural climate change, but this current crisis is almost entirely caused by we humans. And so given that, do we have some responsibility for trying to prevent it from happening? So callers, if you would, I'm not really wanting us to have a big debate about whether it's going to happen or not, but what I'm really hoping is people will call in and share kind of their feelings, their emotions, their responses. So let me ask my co-hosts here. Paul, what's your reaction when somebody brings up the subject of near-term mass extinction?
Well, mass extinction, terrible thing caused by human beings. When we talk about human extinction, it's kind of, because, who is helping this sixth great extinction along, if not us? We are the most destructive species on the planet. Several years ago, perhaps those who used to have breakfast in the station house opposite the Grandy building remember the pro-degradation wall, which was loved and hated in equal measure, perhaps. All about using it all up now. Use it all up now, flush twice, breed more, war more, buy more, and then maybe we'll be out of here sooner because we'll use up all the resources that we need, but maybe we'll take fewer species with us, which was the whole idea of the thing. That
would be a very loving thing to do, would it not? Would it not be generous of our species to recognize that we're not only ending our species, which is no big loss usually in the scheme of evolution, species come and go all the time, but letting us go would allow so many other species to have a chance, have a fighting chance. Exactly. What do you think about that, Mary?
I think that it's very interesting, but I also think there's another side to that, which is what about a shift in consciousness that brings people to the point where they can help? I don't know if that's possible. I think both of you know that I believe we are circling the drain, but I also know that amazing things happen in the most extraordinary ways, and I leave a space for that. And
but does it not start with us talking about it more? Do you believe we talk about extinction too much, too little, not at all?
We don't talk about it that much because it's a real fear topic.
No kidding.
And people are really kind of paralyzed with enough fearful things that are going on and falsely fear things that are being pumped into us every day.
Sure.
There's so many unknowns. Personally, it doesn't change my life one bit because I feel, for me, the wisest way to live is to be grateful for every moment I'm alive, to help where I can, to serve where I can, to have fun, and to help those who don't have a voice. And I feel anybody could die at any moment anyway. So and I was so ill as a young woman that I kind of went through all of that several times in my life. So I feel maybe a little bit differently about it. Is it inevitable? I don't know. All the signs seem to point to it, but I also know extraordinary things can shift things in the wink of an eye.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm optimistic in that way, that I would like to have that level of change that could reverse the trend. I think a lot of people, and I got a nice email from Murray that talks about when he looks out the window, everything looks fine, everything that we see here is fine. So locally, we're not feeling it. But I think that we don't have the awareness generally that how we live locally is actually affecting extinctions elsewhere. I mean, we may be fighting the invasive species that are coming after our sand dunes, or we're protecting one animal or another around here through valiant efforts by environmental and conservation groups, which I'm really appreciative for. But the battles we're fighting here doesn't mean we, in our lifestyles, aren't really causing extinctions globally. Clearly, the polar bear has become a symbol of climate change, where that image of the polar bear sitting on a ice floe that is melting, nowhere to go, can't swim anymore to shore and stuff, really gets us emotionally. I mean, that's a trigger.
Yeah, but there's
Big
things.
fluffy bear.
Yeah.
There's things here that are maybe people don't acknowledge as much, but the wine growers in Napa are certainly noticing it. I'm noticing it in my garden. There's such a phony weather situation going on. The rain isn't really natural rain. The garden's a little bit different. The grape leaves are a little bit different. So we're being very much impacted by that.
Yeah, I wasn't just talking about impacting.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the fact that we are actually the cause. The cause of local extinctions are probably lesser than those ones that are global because of our local actions. And I'm not just talking about us in West Marin. I'm talking about us Western lifestyle people that are Europeans and Americans alike. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're used to having all these creature comforts and all of this thing that we can recognize now contributes to climate change. Even if there were no climate change, there would be extinctions going on at rapid rates that we should fear, because we've seen, these large mammals, like I was talking about polar bear, but when elephants are being killed for their tusks, and rhinos, black rhinos are on the extinction list, and we see the tiger habitat go in various places as development spreads.
And mass die-offs in the ocean. God.
Oh, my God. Whales are part of it. The tuna and other, and the overfishing is going on. It's like we're not turning the corner on this extinction. It seems to be going faster and quicker than ever. So
we're so good at this.
We've become highly efficient at extractive industries. Those extractive industries like fishing, like logging, like mining. They have become ever more efficient and ever more capable of damaging habitat.
Yeah, and what I wonder about often is I believe most people don't like war. Most people want to eat good local food. Most people want to live a healthy life. Most people want those things. So what do we do to turn the leadership around to bring those things in? Is it possible?
Well, before we get to solutions, which I like to talk about, and I will, I believe we're actually waging a war on other species. I think we collectively, as the human species, need to accept this notion that we have been taking more than our fair share so that other species are dying off populations, and they may have gone extinct anyway, but at greater and greater risks because the amount of habitat that's available to them in their natural environment keeps being taken over by humans. So I'd like to say we who are against war are not aware that we are contributors to a war on other species.
The war on nature.
That's an awareness that I'd like to raise, because I don't see it talked about much. When I want to talk to people about this subject, generally I get responses like, well, we're screwed, aren't we? And it's like, yeah, but maybe that's not enough of a conversation. Or there's nothing I can do. It's too big an issue, or it's too far gone, or there's sort of this give up or either make fun of it or not be seriously engaged about how big a change would be necessary if there were any way to prevent human die-off or the complete destruction of life on the planet. When we had the nuclear winter discussions, I thought the world dealt with that. I think we were dealing with it in the media saying, there's mutual assured destruction between the United States and the USSR, and can we just rely on that? Each doesn't want to be annihilated itself to keep from annihilating the others or for launching the first weapon. We had those discussions because we knew how ugly that could get.
Right. That came to a head, though, and the nuclear arms were sort of dismantled, some of them anyway, because it was economically unfeasible, certainly on the Russian side. The Soviet Union was going down the tubes, and so it kind of was a mutually agreed upon destruction of weapons for a while. This is something else, though. I mean, this is caused by money.
Capitalism.
It's caused by capitalism.
Capitalism
by greed,
is at the heart of this.
and by take the world and use it for what you will. It's in the Bible. Right?
That's well, so I used to think that all these environmental and all the problems that face us can be changed with good minds, good intellect, good solutions, good government. But really what it comes down to is how do you change greed, which is driving all of it. It's not the better, building the better, whatever it is, but it's really how do you change the mindset of me, no matter what, and screw you.
Eternal growth at the cost of everything else.
At the cost of life.
Yeah.
I don't frame it as greed at all. I frame it as the systemic system in which we all participate. And the idea that we can own things, that we can own mineral rights, that we can own rights to log this forest.
DNA.
That fact allows people to come in to take advantage of that you would say have greed. But for me, greed is kind of a human attribute. And I think that there are cultures that somehow can raise their young and live in a way that private ownership and hoarding is looked down upon, and these indigenous cultures generally share and live more cooperatively within their hunting grounds and at a local level.
Yeah, because they've managed greed. They've managed to put all of those destructive qualities and make them socially unacceptable. We have glorified those qualities.
You're right.
Look at the CEOs that are going to win at any cost. Look at it's just the opposite mindset.
Yeah, it's cultural. Then we agree. It's not a human species characteristic. It's this
cultural.
But at the base of that culture, I believe, comes this notion of ownership. And I think corporations as a construct made that even worse. In other words, I would be in favor of having no corporations, that all business transactions were people to people. That would force things more locally. I would like to see cultures exist again in with their own languages in many, many cultures throughout the world, throughout North America, as there once were, locally living in that way that learns and respects the other species that's in physical contact with. By becoming global, by having introduced the form of corporations to allow capitalism to become this hyper-global capitalism. I don't think it's individual CEOs. I don't think it's the Koch brothers.
That's a mindset. It's the culture that promotes that kind of thinking.
So to get at the root in our culture, how about we let go of the idea that people own things, that we are only here to live on the land in harmony with other species rather than that we own it.
Well, we've seen that. All the indigenous cultures have dealt with that beautifully, but unfortunately, they're not the ones who are ripping up the rainforest. They're not the ones who are with huge power, huge money, who are destroying the cultures that live that way. I think it's more than ironic that at times like this, the only people that really have the wisdom about how to live on the earth are, of course, the indigenous cultures. It's just...
Yeah.
Too ironic for words.
Well, it's such a shame that the Europeans could not somehow try to learn some of that wisdom instead of coming over with the arrogance of, we're here for Jesus, and so get out of the way.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
I'm David.
David.
Point Reyes.
David from Point Reyes. How are you?
Oh, well, I'm very good. Thank you very much.
Hi, David.
Hi. I'm sorry. I had somebody in my shop who took up all my valuable time, so I wasn't able to listen to the first part of the show. I worked closely with Donna Sheehan and Paul talking about our pro-degradation concept, which I actually still believe in wholeheartedly, which is basically saving the earth, but sacrificing the humans because we're the ones who are destroying it. And I just want to pose a question to everybody who's listening, and you all can, of course, weigh in too. And the question that I keep coming up with is to name some activities that are sustainable.
Well, I'll take a first stab at that. This is Bernie.
Okay.
I mean, I've taken a few classes in permaculture and studied that, and I think those ethics and those principles are a good guiding way. If all human development followed those, we would be in a less harmful way and on our way to sustainability, I believe. And, I think that what else needs to happen in addition to that is resistance of the current paradigm, the dominant paradigm. So resisting the dominant paradigm, shifting to a new paradigm that is like permaculture. I'm not saying it's the only answer, but for me it offers a lot of orientation to doing development in a sustainable way.
Yeah, I would say on the relationships. If we were more focused on our interactions with others rather than trying to do them down, the old neoliberalism that's sweeping the globe. If we could do that, if we had as much respect for others as we might possibly have for ourselves, it would be a whole different deal going on. There would be less competition, less greed, blah, blah, blah. What do you think, Mary?
I'm going to go back to your book because I think that's a very key piece here. It's like if we have relationships that are really true relationships and based on respect and harmony, and where the woman, we've gone with the woman being in worship and the men taking over. We've never done the partnership. And if we do the true partnership, the whole world could change. Really faster than any other thing. That's why your book blew my mind, Paul.
Thank you.
So, David, how would you answer your own question?
Well, both of you have said things that are kind of more, or all three of you said things that were more theoretical, I would say, as in, yes, let's have better relationships or more egalitarianism. But given the fact that we live where we do in this beautiful place, but if we want anything, as in even at this point, anything to eat, we have to do some very unsustainable activities.
How about the idea that we shut down the grid, that we give up electricity, and we stop bringing fossil fuels to West Marin? How about that?
That'll require a lot of changing. I mean, it's a nice idea and ideal, but
it's not concrete enough for you?
Well, it's pretty concrete, but what we would have to do in order to arrange that
well, is it possible that we can't bring it about ourselves, but that a economic collapse may help us in the sense of bringing down the existing global structure that is so harmful and give us a chance to kind of figure out how to do things locally on our own a lot more?
Yep. Would we figure it out in time?
Well, we could start talking about it now and be ready. So when the economic collapse happens, I've always been a big advocate of, rather than people saying, oh, gosh, my stock portfolio just crashed to zero, I'm going to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, to say, hallelujah, finally, that's over, and we can start anew on a level playing field at the local level, really living in a whole new way. Yes, will people suffer? Of course they will. Huge numbers. And David, we got 7 billion people on Earth. How many do you think the Earth can sustain for a long time, for generations?
How many? I don't have that figure actually in mind.
Okay.
I think the population decrease is already handled when you see the amount of destruction that's coming via shortage of food, weather events, the Planet X. I mean, whatever you want to choose your poison, because there are so many horrific events lined up to take their place that I don't think population is going to be such a big problem in the near future.
It begins.
It's not so cheery, but I believe it's true.
Yeah.
So, David, do you blame capitalism, or do you believe capitalism can be fixed?
I hadn't really thought about that in capitalism.
And I don't mean in opposition to centralized socialism or fascism or anything central. My view is it doesn't really matter how we construct if we continue on this economics of scale, having centralized powers and nations and United Nations efforts and NATO and all of those organizations. I think that all of those are destructive, and that unless we can somehow get rid of that superstructure that's far away trying to govern our lives and get back to the reality of where we are and how we would interact with our farmers here directly to get our food, and how we would take water directly out of our watershed, and how we would, sort of learn to live with the species that are here to sustain us as humans. That's a tall order.
And then what about people from the city coming to
that's why we have
maraud?
guns.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
it's another issue, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That's the population problem, that we can't feed the whole world, even with the model that's currently being propagated. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that GMOs are the answer, or that the Gates Foundation has the knowledge for how to keep feeding the world at the levels we're doing. Mm-hmm. Do you, David?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. So are you a fan of focusing locally, David?
I haven't gotten so specific in my mind about it. I guess, that's the symptom of depression. when you just, I feel like I'm kind of at the mercy of it, and I can take small steps.
Yeah.
And, in a certain way, I have taken some steps just by living here and living on a smaller scale.
Excellent. And I would suggest you took a big step today by being our first caller.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
calling.
David.
Yeah, keep it going. Thanks.
All right,
bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, the number is 415-663-8492. Give us a call. Let us know what, ask us questions, as David did, about are there solutions to this extinction event that's happening? My big bugbear, of course, is the chemical load in the environment that's causing incredible changes in the fauna and flora, and to what end? It's like the GMOs are the same. It's we're trying to create this mechanized agriculture that's just killing everything off.
Industrial agriculture is what we've got, and we're all dependent on it right now. Yeah.
Anyway, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Good morning. It's Amanda.
Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. Oh,
hi.
We heard about your bicycle accident.
It was a crash.
Crash. Oh, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, but I'm calling because I was thinking about extinction on a smaller, sort of like microscopic scale, with this crazy need that as a culture, at least in the Western culture, of antibacterial soaps and killing off of everything to protect ourselves, which we have discovered is bad, and that we're teeming with bacteria, and that a lot of them are critical and important for us, and killing off smells and using these weird scented air fresheners and all this stuff is just so nasty. And, I think that we, as a culture, there's sort of this need to control things when, you feel like you're controlling things, but you're really just putting yourself at risk.
Wow. I also think it's a reaction to the huge amount of propaganda all over our media to buy those products, that you're not going to be okay. You know what I mean? It's
I don't watch television, and I was someplace and I turned on the TV, and it was air freshener ad after air freshener ad after antibacterial, kill it soap, creams, gels. Right. It's disgusting. I say everyone should just go out and eat a spoon of dirt.
That's a very good idea.
That's such excellent advice, Amanda. I love where you've taken this conversation, because I think that we've done that with the soil, where there are so many things in the soil to make it healthy, and yet industrial agriculture is about rototilling it and adding the chemicals they want and having the seeds.
It all blows into the ocean.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Because we're not taking care of it, we're not mulching, and I think when you really start talking about extinction, we can worry about an apocalyptic explosion and we all die and are running around in our Mad Max outfits and using pee for fuel or whatever. But I think that really when we start thinking about it, we're doing this annihilation daily.
In our own homes.
In our own homes.
It's such an excellent point, and it makes me think about medicine and the antibiotics that have been prescribed. That does that same thing of not only targeting the one bacteria that is making us ill, but killing so many good bacteria that we do need.
Yeah, it just goes right up the scale, and pretty soon we're just the ones being annihilated and leaving room for the people that can, or the species that can exist.
Yeah,
that's all I
No, that's great. In 20 years, I've said this before, that 40% of their diversity has disappeared.
Yes.
We've in 20 years. That is a breathtaking statistic.
Yeah.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much, and we wish you all a recovery because we miss you here at the station.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
So, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there are so many contributors to this idea of losing species.
This, again, another bugbear of mine, because going into houses that have so-called air fresheners, filling your house with neurotoxins is not freshening the air. It's not fresh. It's synthetic air. So there you go.
One thing I'd like to note is that in our system of capitalism and this everyone rising tides lift all ships and we all get more and more and more as we extract more, etc. Conservation groups have been the mainstay that we've looked to kind of counter that. Nature Conservancy was formed in 1951. The World Wildlife Fund was done in 1961. The Natural Resource Defense Council in 1970. Conservation International in 1987. A lot of people give a lot of money to these organizations and have the hope that somehow they can be the antidote, the pressure that protects all of these species. But the truth is that they give us the impression that something will be done, but the truth is we've been losing ground every year. And conservation biologists have actually shown that you can create a little isolated island of biodiversity, but that gradually that island will get less and less biodiverse. In other words, gradually extinction is happening. So that's a reality, and unfortunately, we all feel overpowered by it. So one of the first steps, as we were talking about, I think, is if we acknowledge that we are all complicit in this through our participation in the system, that maybe that could lend us to discuss the kinds of big changes that are global and right now feel like they're impossible. David was asking, what can we do locally
what is sustainable,
practically now? That's always difficult because unless somehow we topple this capitalist mindset. And I think it begins with our thinking. And in that thinking is when we start admitting it and seeing it and growing awareness. We have to process grief and anger. And we have to, I believe, really come to terms with it and not sort of jump to the step of what solution, who do we elect, what do we stop buying, what do we ban, what do we create another law around. Those are all like surface stuff to me, and I think we need to live with it at a deep level. And I'm hoping today a few more folks will call in and share how maybe you deal with this subject.
And we have one on the line right now. Caller, what's your name, please? You're on the air.
Hi, I'm Melinda Lighthold.
Melinda.
Hi, Melinda.
Well, burden of grief, I think we're all in denial big time, and that's one of our chief characteristics. I think language, just by the fact that we're trapped in our language, keeps us really far from the earth itself. We could do mass suicide. That might be a gift to the world. I'm not kidding.
I know, but it's like I have children and grandchildren, and I wouldn't want them to do that. I mean, I honestly think at my age I might volunteer, but I really don't want to see future generations have to resort to something like that.
Every child is another car.
Future generations is an education, a social shift that they actually are educated from the get-go to actually, one, appreciate the natural world and learn how to think about things. Because this whole thing of people buying air freshener, for Christ's sake, anybody that's, gone to school should know at least how to think about things like that. I would think.
Well, Melinda, I think you're absolutely right in naming denial. There's all sorts of levels of denial, are there not? I mean, we have had a big discussion in this country about climate denial, like that somehow now Republicans deny it, Democrats don't. It's like, for me, that's crazy because it isn't something that is a yes or no answer in a way, and it's part of a bigger issue. Climate change isn't the only thing. It's really our whole way of life, and that's what people don't want to examine. Do you agree, Melinda?
Yeah, I mean, it's we're so far from the Earth.
Yeah.
And it seems like getting farther all the time. The more techno reality or whatever it is. I have a 7th grader granddaughter, and I can tell she's in her cell phone, and anyway, she doesn't really know any better.
Yes, yes.
So
bring him out here to West Marin is the best bet we have, and let him run free in the park, right?
Well, she's done that, and but we are a kid that gets to come to West Marin and run free in the park is a super, super highly privileged kid.
Exactly.
And most of the world is living the way you're suggesting that we might if we were really daring. In other words, being hungry, being on the ground, being homeless. Come on, we're in a la-la land out here.
We're super privileged and affluent, like no one else on Earth, really.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, but at least to talk about it. But I think the burden of grief phrase in your little blurb is big.
So how do you carry that grief?
I carry it by pretty much ignoring it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd just be walking around town, tearing out my hair and putting ashes on my head and sobbing. I wouldn't be able to. I think we just carry on with our little ego identities because we don't know what else to do.
There are people, and I think Joanna Macy is at the core of it. Carolyn Baker is into grief counseling and stuff.
Joanna Macy lives in a beautiful house in Berkeley.
Yeah.
I've been there. And she buys food at wherever, and she goes out to dinner, just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And then we get to go to Tamales Bay Foods and buy cheese and wine and bread. And, it's very, very funny contradiction.
So do you welcome
a contradiction all the time? I'm going to...
Would you welcome an economic collapse to help us change our ways?
Well, yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Well, I do. I believe that...
If that would change our ways, maybe people who had more wouldn't think about that sharing was such a hot idea.
Well, see, an ecological collapse to me is much, much worse than an economic collapse. And given that our economic system is the one that's degrading our ecological systems, I think that's what we should be looking forward to rather than what our current politics is all about is who can improve our economic well-being mostly by more jobs, more development, more industry, more of everything.
I don't want more. Yeah. Well, okay, if that's true, if it's all because of our view and our practice of economics, then an economic collapse would be great. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you for the program.
Well, thank you, Melinda, so much for calling in.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. So, yes, we're tackling something here that is very difficult to talk about, and I appreciate Melinda's honesty about I mostly deal with it by ignoring it, and I think that really speaks for most of us.
Yeah, or as you were saying earlier, people donate to NRDC or whatever, Sierra Club, Greenpeace,
EAC.
They're all doing great, EAC,
Yeah.
and that makes them feel good. As you slap the check down, you say, this makes me feel good, I'm doing something, but, maybe it's doing something. We have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
You talking to me?
I am talking to you.
This is Sierra Salem.
Hi, Sierra. Thanks so much for calling again.
Where do you even start? What a mess. It's like you can't be a part, you can't exist in our society without basically destroying the commons. I think we've pretty much owned and fenced and monetized the commons about as far as we can. And talk about extinctions and everything else. It's like most of us don't want to look at it, and most of us can't look at it, can't contain it. And those of us that, do look at it or feel it or see it, for the most part, we're kind of dismissed and minimized and looked at like we're crazy or borderline, or it's like, why not get with the program? It's like, join the party and enjoy. And most of us just aren't willing to sacrifice anything, or, I pretty much hate the whole, inconvenient truth. The fact is how few of us actually try and do everything we can to stay out of a car, as opposed to just hopping in every time to, drive over the hill or go to the market or hey, it's like I'm doing what I can to save Earth. I got my fluorescent light bulbs, which have their mercury problems too, but how few of us turn off a stupid light bulb, and how few of us do what we can to stay out of an airplane. It's rather than I'm going on my vacation now. It's like,
but I like what you're talking about, so we still want to hear from you. Just be careful what words you choose, okay? I know you, and let me ask you, Sierra. I know one of the things you've been pushing for a long time is that because we have our trash and our quote-unquote recyclables picked up curbside in these convenient containers and stuff, we tend to ignore how much trash we generate. You've been pushing the idea that maybe we should all have to just deal with what we have on our own properties in our own homes, and that would go a long way to addressing part of the problem.
We don't look at our backside. It's like the Earth is infinite. Well, it's confusing because the universe is an infinite place, but at the same time, it's finite. We live on a finite planet. Creativity is infinite, but how many natural environments are infinite? And as long as we can throw things away in our trash can and we never have to look at them, it's all over us.
Yeah, there is no such thing as a way, right?
Yeah, and the problem in West Marin here was recently brought to attention of everybody again. The service we have actually puts the recycling bin and the garbage bin in the same big container and takes it all to a place where they claim then they separate it. So it's a joke that we all are taught this important thing of separating out our recyclables.
Well, what are we doing to just try not to consume to begin with?
That's a good point.
And it's pretty difficult. Our trash cans are mostly plastic. We also have worm bins and compost and recycles and all that. And like I said before, it's next to impossible to have anything to do with our society and not have an incredibly big backside. It used to be you could take your glass jars to the co-op or the natural food store and fill stuff, and now everybody even they go get their new plastic container every time, even if they're getting in bulk or.
So, Sierra, I believe you are committed to raising consciousness. Do you think that is happening in our population? Are we making any success in getting more people to be able to have this discussion that we're having right now?
I think it all comes down to education, Bernie. I've been a part of conversations in the schools, in Ross Valley and Tamalpais Union. There's this concept of wellness, which is somehow separate than academics, and wellness being social, emotional health, education, empathy, as opposed to most of our society, at least around here, is all about academics, and you can't quantify. How do you quantify the cost of, a youth jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge or dropping out of high school, or depression or drug abuse or all those services? They don't necessarily show up on a school budget like teacher salaries and utilities do, so it gets discounted or dismissed. But how do we react? How do we take care of each other when we kind of dismiss all of that? It's all about money somehow, and money is what counts and what's important. But is community important? Does community have a value? Does living earth, air, and water have a value beyond what we can making a buck off it?
It will again. It will again, I believe. If we have a global economic collapse, people will see the value of community, of relationships, and things that are local. Sierra, thank you so much for calling in and being a part of the show.
Thank you,
yes,
guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yes, this treatment of nature. Well, so back when the Bible was written and God said, "Go forth and multiply and use the earth for what you want to do and take it over. It's your dominion. That's right. I mean, that was the whole thing. And now it's more like, especially with big ag, it's more like earth is just something that holds plants up, right? I mean, it's just something you can stick
its
things
job
in
is gravity, and that's it.
Right. Not a living organism. Anyway. Okay, caller, you are on the air. What's your name, please?
It's Lions.
Hello, Lions.
Hi, Lions.
And I'm definitely watching my language.
Oh, thank you.
English, I hope.
Yes.
We appreciate that.
It was something that somebody said a little while back in the show about indigenous people having the wisdom. And I was at a Bioneers conference some years back, and I'm sorry to say I can't remember who the speaker was, but she was a Native American, and she reminded us that we were all indigenous people at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about, what are the roots of your genetic or racial or place-based background, go back and track what that wisdom was.
Yeah, the wisdom that we've forgotten or have ignored or have been taught to ignore. Perhaps.
Yeah, and I totally agree that we need to take responsibility for these things. I just don't find it helpful to keep lashing myself with, "Ooh, we're doing this," and "Aren't we dreadful?" and so on and so forth. Let's focus on what we can return to.
Very good.
Our culture, as you say, we're indigenous. I go back to Europe in terms of relating my personal story.
Yeah, me too.
And in that society, there has been this notion of some people dominating others, pushing down certain cultures and subsets of that society and treating them less than human as animals. And then the idea, and Paul, you were talking about going back to religion, that gave the notion that we are somehow separate from life and that we get to dominate all of the other species. So, with that ownership, if we think we have it, comes a huge responsibility, does it not? Or can we get to a point where we start viewing human life no better or no worse than any other species?
Well, I don't buy into the idea that we can be in charge of everything, so I'm not taking responsibility for that mindset. But we are, in fact, the dominant species on the planet, and we have a responsibility to take care of that.
Yeah.
Not to abuse that role.
And would you agree, Lions, that it's not our whole species, but the subset of that species that is our dominant culture right now?
Well, I'm not an historian. I don't know a lot about these things, but I think we can safely say that tribes of people everywhere around the world have fought with each other, one claiming dominance over the other, or a more violent tribe pounding down on the more peaceful tribes. That happens everywhere. I think it's the human species, not just one subset. We're all capable of doing that.
I think the Industrial Revolution was the key to the massive destruction when growth became a thing, when it was all about taking what we needed from nature and disregarding anything that creeped or crawled or viruses and bacteria that we would not be here without, that we would not exist without bacteria and viruses that are in our bodies.
That's right.
Yeah, it's we're blind. It's a mindset, and it's a cultural mindset. It used to be handed down from God, and now it's just we are the gods, and we're everything is subservient to us. And how's that going?
Not very well.
Not so good.
Well, Lions, thank you so much for calling in and contributing.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Yeah, so this idea that our culture went wrong, and you talk about it, Industrial Revolution, clearly that was founded on cheap energy like coal initially, and then it turned into the oil and gas and et cetera that allowed us to magnify that inherent idea of you can own the means of production, you can own this ability to extract ever more. The cultures that will indeed fight that are more indigenous, I think tend to fight more around maintaining a border, not as much dominating others. I think, for example, the slaves from Africa, people say, well, it was Africans who put other Africans into bondage, but that was because they were paid by the Europeans who had the ships that would bring them to the Americas to do the slave labor after they killed off the indigenous people that they used as slaves to do the labor that were no longer there. So there's a lot more blame to our European-based industrial revolution culture than other cultures. And so I don't want to, in my mind, blanket humanity with these faults.
No, it's the white folks have been the big problem, and that imperial mindset, empire is how we operate, and the way that's happened, the way that's affected the world is that everyone now wants to be an empire, or everyone covets what the U.S. has, and we're creating more and more empires everywhere. And more want, more need, more greed, more everything.
Well, the Occupy movement made a nice slogan of the 1% versus the 99%. That really took hold in people's minds, and I still hear even politicians, be it Bernie Sanders or whomever, talk about the 1% being the problem. The problem, of course, is a system that allows there to be a 1% that has everything so centralized and power concentrated. If that power and political power were more diffuse throughout the country, and we were only dealing with whatever political power struggles we had here in West Marin, I think we'd do less damage working it out who would get the final say. Let's say it's a council of elders, and that maybe only women sit on, or however we define it. We could have our own Supreme Court here. We really don't need a Supreme Court that's about protecting property rights above everything else. So there's still time for somebody to call, right?
415-663-8492. Give us a call. We have a few minutes left here. How is extinction treating you? And we do have a caller. Hi, caller. You are on the air. What's your name, please?
My name is Colin.
Colin, hi.
Hi, Colin.
Hi. I'm enjoying the conversation, and I feel like I agree with a lot of your guys' sort of assessment of how things are going and how we got into this situation. And I'm hearing a little traces of Daniel Quinn maybe influence in your discussion. Have some of you been reading his work?
Tell us what he says.
Pardon?
We don't. Could you enlighten us as to what he says?
Oh, well, I don't want to be too redundant, but, there's a book called Ishmael that he wrote, and a follow-up to it called The Story of B, where he just talks about, like you said, how our ancestors in our particular culture, amongst all the tribes on the earth, like, our tribal ancestors were the ones who started to kind of shift from maybe coexisting a little more peacefully with their surroundings. Granted, they were fighting and whatnot, but and kind of take over and take the resources of the earth for themselves. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I just was hearing that, but also, and I think your question that I heard was kind of how am I dealing with my anger and grief about the situation.
Yes, how are you?
Well, partly I enjoy having conversations with other people who are sort of seeing the reality of where things are going and just acknowledging it. And, usually those conversations become a little bit heated as we, express a little bit of our anger. But it does feel like so many people only want to have that conversation for a couple minutes and then move on to, something a little more cheery. And so it's a little bit, it feels a little isolating to want to explore those issues more deeply and really think realistically about what's coming and how we should prepare or something. So partly I try and talk about it, partly while I feel like I'm pretty aware, certainly part of me is in denial in terms of not doing anything about it or feeling cynical and hopeless about it. So partly I feel as though by being cynical or ignoring it to some extent. But I'm also kind of always trying to, I guess, find a way to do something, but I'm not sure what that is yet. So,
well, today you had the courage to call in, and I don't hear you being cynical at all. I think you being extremely concerned, and I definitely relate to what you're saying, Colin. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Colin.
Well, reckoning with this is difficult. We've talked about the idea that maybe humans could voluntarily do ourselves in. Not sure we're going to get a lot of people signed up to do that.
I don't think
but there's no doubt that there's no going back on a lot of this. And we can't unsee what we've seen. We can't undo what we've done. We can talk about it. We can raise awareness, consciousness, and as Colin was saying, there's very few people to talk to. That's my experience. So that's why I wanted to bring that topic here today. And I so very much appreciate all of our callers today. I also thank our listeners who didn't call, and I hope you'll all tune in every Thursday 11 because your voice really does matter. Okay, we can take one quick call.
One more call. Why not?
It'll have to be short.
Hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name,
Thank
please?
you. Hi, Paul. This is Johnny Moore calling.
Hey, Johnny.
Hey, I've listened to the show in its entirety this morning, and because I was, I wanted to participate, and what I realized for me was what keeps me sane, so that I, like lions, don't have to lash at myself, and especially like Amanda spoke about the air fresheners. I have a neighbor downstairs that used the cheapest one on the market, and I literally have to tape up my furnace fence so that I don't breathe her choices. But when I realized that the underscoring everything that's been going on here, I'm hearing personal integrity. That is, I give my word, I keep my word. And with my deeds. Meaning, when I do separate my things that go for recycling, where they do go, I have no control over. But individually, where I am, if I take care of the small stuff, the things that I think that might not matter, when I drop a piece of plastic, does it go to recycling or does it go to the landfill? Things, small things, I've found keep me in balance. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Johnny. That's a great way to end the show. We really appreciate your call.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.